Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I want to get into some of the things I've said, prophecies, spiritual understanding of what's going on with the possibility of World War III, things to do with some of my previous videos. But let me start off here with this woman, Anna Lynn McCord, who is a Hollywood actress that I have never heard about until today, because she decided to insert herself into the Annalyn McCord trolled over Vladimir Putin video amid Russian and Ukraine war. She has 201,000 followers on Twitter, and she has almost 500,000 on Instagram. She posted this video. I guess it's not on Instagram. There she is with that Sadhguru. So I think she thinks of herself as some sort of, I don't know, faketivist. And she decided to make a Twitter video to one Vladimir D. Putin. I don't know their middle names. And so, Dear President Vladimir Putin.
Dear President Vladimir Putin.
I'm sure he's glad you're making a video for him.
I'm so sorry that I was not your mother.
Oh boy. This is where I stopped because I knew it was going to be great. I didn't want to have to watch it 3 times. I knew I was going to have to cover it, so I figured, okay, let's just have a fresh reaction to this.
If I was your mother, you would have been so loved, held in the arms of joyous light. Never would the stories plight the world unfurled before our eyes, a pure demise.
Wow. So this is very typical for these celebrities who think that somehow they have, the ability to insert themselves, in terms of their, acting in their imaginary world in which they live, and their narcissism, that she's inserting herself into this story. That she could have saved the world had she been Vladimir Putin's mom, right? Did you even look up his mom? Like, did you find out maybe his mom was great? Did you even, consider that maybe his own mom wasn't some superficial Hollywood tramp who, who, is so narcissistic she thinks that inserting herself into this story, right? The story between Russia and the Ukraine is, the right thing to do.
Of nations sitting peaceful under a night sky. If I was your mother, the world would have been warm. So much laughter and joy, and nothing would harm. I can't imagine the stain, the soul-stealing pain that the little boy you must have seen and believed.
And this woman is completely clueless just completely clueless to what America's done with our military. Just, I mean, the tone deaf, the inability to self-perceive, phenomenal. Like the United States in all of our wars, our recent wars, and our military-industrial complex, and just what we've done in terms of manipulating governments and interfering in elections and all these things. And what about China? Like, you think just if you had been Vlad's mom, it would all be better. It would be just, the world would be perfect because she just has so much love to give.
And the formulation of thought quickly taught that you lived in a cruel, unjust world. Is this why you now decide no one will get the best of you? Is this why you do not hide nor away shy from taking back the world? Was it because so early in life, all that strife racked your little body with fear?
This is going to only come from a Hollywood celebrity or some new age clueless bimbo, right? Just unbelievable.
If I was your mother, if the world was cold, I'd have died to make you warm. I'd have died to protect you from the unjust, the violence, the terror, the uncertainty. I would have died to give you life. Oh, dear Mr. President Putin.
She's one heck of an imaginary mom. Like, in terms of imaginary mom, she's like one of the best.
If only I'd been your mother. Perhaps The torture of unwrit youth would not within your heart imbue ascription to such fealty against that world that you thought was so cruel. Perhaps you would hold dear human life, and on this night, instead of Mother Russia, you would call me, and I would set your mind quite free with the love that only a mother can give.
You know, if I wasn't meeting with somebody more important in Hollywood, you know, if I wasn't on a real movie or something, then yeah, I would give you my time. And if I wasn't doing something superficial like making a video on Instagram or Twitter to promote myself, yeah, I might give you a little bit of love or something like that.
And only a mother can take away. When holds she doesn't the harm at bay and leaves her boy for the promise of a man, whatever your story, Mr. President Putin, I can't imagine how it feels in your heart, but I know if I was your mother, that would be a start.
That would be a start. It's really bad poetry, but she's like going for it. She's like
towards the awareness of what a powerful being of light you could be if your mind was only free from the violence you've seen when you were just 2 or 3. I cannot believe I was born too late.
She was born too late to save the world.
In a different place when I would have loved you so, watched you play wherever you go.
Okay, so it ends there, but I found some other things here. So here she's in a show called Nip and Tuck, which I assume is about plastic surgery. And if it isn't, I don't care. Don't tell me. Don't need to know. She plays a character named Eden, which is also, the Garden of Eden, which is interesting.
They told me to come right in, so that's what I...
So she is dressed in a schoolgirl's outfit. This is the kind of character she played on these crappy B-level TV shows. But she could have saved the world if she's Mother of the Year. She has Mother of the Year potential.
I did.
And you are?
Weston.
So that's her level of, Hollywood. That's her Hollywood contribution. Okay, I noticed there was one more video worth commenting on here, or just showing a quick glimpse of this. Because, believe it or not, she has psychological issues.
Lynn McCord, best known for her role as Naomi on the hit show 90210, and
she was Naomi on 90210.
Now, activist has been making headlines about a recent medical diagnosis. Take a look at this.
I was living the American lie. I mean dream. I mean lie.
Crazy. She was living the American lie, not the Russian lie. Because she really was meant to be Putin's mom, right? And she was born into the body and the mindset and the ego of a B-level Hollywood actress who's on crappy TV shows, who apparently always played the vixen character. And so, there's where she's having the issues.
I had hit my major break in the industry. I was going to be on 90210, and here I was self-harming, suicidal.
Yeah, but she could have made a great mom to Putin.
Depressed, anxious, holding all of it right here, just stuffing it, because no one was going to see me crack.
There's a schism afoot here. So she talked a lot about being into really, demonic stuff with, sexual stuff and going down a rabbit hole of self-destructive behaviors. And then she says this.
3 years ago, I was diagnosed with DID, dissociative identity disorder.
Boom. Listen to the music they're playing, okay? So that is having multiple personalities. So which personality wants to be Putin's mom? I mean, it's very, she reminds me of Sharon Stone, and she has obviously some connections and similarities to my ex, right? And so this is the kind of grandiose personality that has trouble functioning in life and severe psychological issues, but also thinks that if somehow they could insert themselves into the global stage, that they could save the world with their love, right? And this is someone who doesn't really have the capacity. I mean, someone who is struggling with just living life, right? In the depraved Hollywood culture and all these things. And so I want to move on to bigger and better things, but this demonstrates like where we are as a culture, the narcissism and the grandiosity, where this person who has, multiple personalities and a long history of depraved behavior and, self-abuse and all these other, psychological disorders and issues, thinks that if they just could have been Putin's mom, we could have avoided World War III, right? And so let's get into the more important part here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, my understanding about what's happening here. And I read some of the Whispers of the Brighter World messages and prophecies and predictions about how nuclear power would ruin this world, right? And that there was a big event is scheduled for 2025, 2026, which is now in 4 years. But when I read those prophecies, it was 20 years away. So, 20 years wasn't the longest amount of time, but 20 years is a long time. It's 2 decades, 10 years. As you get older, the time moves quicker, and I don't know why that is, but, a decade's a long time. And so, my family and I back then were living on a homestead, and, my kids were kind of young, and there was all these things that we were trying to do anyway that would feed into or prepare us for the inevitable upheavals. And it wasn't clear what the upheavals were going to be, right? The first one, it was, nuclear war was there, but it wasn't specified. And so we didn't know what it was. But since that time, I went through a divorce and was in India for 5 years, and our homestead collapsed, and returned to America, remarried, and, started a new farm and, this YouTube channel. And, one of my children, my daughter, committed suicide about a year ago. I mean, there's been all these things, big events, upheavals in my own personal life. And now it's here, like now these prophecies, right? So for those of you who don't know, there was this French woman who, as a child, suffered a horrific fall off a horse, and then she was operated on by a doctor she referred to as a butcher, who mangled her back in some way, that she was in severe chronic pain for the rest of her life. She became a heartfulness meditative, a practitioner of the heartfulness meditation. And at some point, the second master of the system, Babaji, started to contact her after he had, passed away in 1983. This is in the early 90s. And he started to deliver her all these channeled messages, including these prophecies that freaked her out, right? And so let me just go read those 2 that I read in the other video. Let me see if I can find this here. Here it is. I got to make it bigger and then expand it. 2 separate things. In a quarter of a century, the Earth will experience a major turbulence. That will be the beginning of a cycle which Earthmen will find. It was dated Wednesday, February 28th, 2001, 9 a.m. So it's almost exactly, I think today's let me just check my phone really quickly here. Today's the 25th. So almost, this was 2001, so 21 years ago and 3 days. And so let me just fix it again here. And so Wednesday, February 28th, 2001, 9 a.m., and it says, in a quarter century, the Earth will experience a major turbulence. So this is, again, 4 years from now. And it might not be, to the day. So this was, around a quarter of a century. The Earth will experience a major turbulence that will begin beginning of a cycle which Earthmen will find very difficult to go through. Fire will literally beat down on certain parts of the world, whereas torrents of rain will pour over others. Cataclysms will follow one another for many long years, keeping men frightened. Many will turn toward a supreme God, beseeching his forgiveness, forgiveness for more and more aberrant behaviors, as well for the maltreatment imposed on their nourishing mother, the earth. The failure to respect the elements will lead to effects generating terror among the population of the end of the century. So this is, at the end of this century. Yet the creatures inhabiting this place will have more, as then it says, in the future the present layout of the continents will be shattered, maps will need revising, yet the creatures inhabiting this planet will have more than enough to do in order to survive rather than dealing with those details. Atom, A-T-O-M, will turn against mankind, who will not have been able to harness it, and its lightning power will be devastating. The time for punishment for such a conceit will take place as hard as it can, and men praying for his ancestors' glaring mistakes will suffer without having any control over the situation. The transformation of this planet must go through all of these cataclysms in order to be effectively completed, Babaji. And what he's saying there is we have to go through this to evolve spiritually and, move to the next level. This is, like a caterpillar climbing out of a cocoon, which isn't as easy as people think it is, right? It's but this is, of course, much worse because it's nuclear war and other things. And so the other message is here. Again, I have to make it bigger here so I can see it better. And so this is Friday, December 29th, 2000, a year earlier, 8 a.m. Nuclear power will ruin the world. This badly controlled power is demonic. One day man will be overwhelmed by its power. Upheavals that will change the world will have their origin in it. It has much wider implications than you could imagine, and which contribute to destabilizing the balance of this planet. In this manner, also man plays with fire without actually being aware of the detrimental consequences for humanity. A natural energy will replace all that is currently used and which are harmful to man. Human knowledge does not allow for its use for the time being. These secrets will be revealed to men of goodwill who will look into an inspired scientific research. That energy will be non-polluting and not very expensive. Those with money power will not be content with it. Only the absolute necessity for the survival of the world will prevail. This time is not going to happen tomorrow. The earth will go through great changes before getting into that. These prophecies do not concern you. You are undergoing the damaging effects of this insidious pollution which will lead the world to collapsing, but you can neither stop time nor modify the system in place. Then protect yourself as well as possible from these harmful effects and pray for your brothers of the future. And so I've had some thoughts about this, right? Because, these prophecies, if they start coming true, and they start in 4 years, 4.5 years, whatever it is, sometime between 2025 and 2026, that's the window that he's saying here. And that there's nothing you can neither stop time nor modify the current system in place, which I've been aware of more and more. That if this thing is going to happen, then it isn't Putin or Biden, it isn't the controllers, it isn't, there's always blame and finger pointing. It isn't the Russians and Americans. It's something that's going to happen, and it has to happen for, our system that's going in a demonic direction to be reset and get us off to a more divine, a more, soul-driven existence, right? Where we are connected to our souls and we're no longer egotistical people. And there's nothing anybody can do. No matter how high you are, no matter what level of divinity you have, this is God's will. It's part of a plan. And we have to accept it, right? And so for those of you who don't do heartfulness or don't, trust these things or whatever, right? Well, you shouldn't. It's not something that you have to believe in, but it's something that I, have to share with everybody as a possible explanation for what we're seeing now. And again, it hasn't happened yet. So we don't know. And when I first read this, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Didn't bother me. Wasn't concerned about it. But now it's 4 years away and we're, on the cusp of nuclear war or some sort of World War III with Russia, right? Not that that's happened yet, but it looks like it's going to happen. And so I'm going to comment on that, talk about that. And maybe I'll find another couple of these messages that are pertain to this. I don't know. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to go eat breakfast now. But I'll come back to this and, just talk about this in a way, how it could play out and why it'll play out on a human level. But if this is God's will and this is divine providence, there's nothing anybody can do. And so, what are we going to do with this time we have left? So I'm back from my breakfast, and MSNBC, I believe, was talking about $7 gas prices in California, as a result of this economic sanctions against Russia. And Jojo Magoo even addressed this in his speech, which I'll probably get to another video today if I get time to do that. I'll probably put that up on my other channel. So I'll cover Jojo Magoo's speech on apocalaughsnow, just to balance things out, algorithm-wise. There'll be 2 videos up here today. But getting into this idea of spirituality and war, God and war. And so all the great spiritual movements had wars and upheavals and cataclysms, or whatever you want to call them. All the great, saints and spiritual masters that have been around. And there's been a movement for humanity to get closer to God, especially during the Kali Yuga period. The Mahabharata brought in, which is an epic war that brought in the Kali Yuga. So the Mahabharata happened at the end of the previous Yuga before the Kali Yuga began. And there's a couple of reasons for this, right? When there is a destabilized earth, and there's volcanoes and earthquakes and war and things like this, it cleans off the boga, right? It cleans off all the negative energy that's built up for a certain period of time. And so if there's hatred, which we see is so prevalent today, which has been building up, the hatred builds up into a war and it's released. And you can see this even in interpersonal relationships and fights with one's spouse or family members. Oftentimes these things come to a head and there's a release, and maybe people mature, and there is also appreciation and gratitude and humbling, right? Humanity has to be humbled. America has to be humbled. All these leaders across the world have to be humbled. The people who control the planet. People take things for granted, get entitled, and then all of a sudden a war happens and it's like a slap in the face, right? And people will pray during war. People will try to connect to God, or work to connect to God during hurricane or something, right? My brother used to say that when times are good, bars do well. When times are horrible, bars do great, right? You could say the same thing about God, or really not the same thing. When times are good, people don't think about God. But when their life is threatened, I showed you that scene from the end of the movie, The End, where Burt Reynolds, my dad told me about the movie, I never saw it. Kind of sucky movie. Burt Reynolds made a lot of sucky movies. But my dad told me, there was a scene where he swam out in the ocean to kill himself, Burt Reynolds character, because he had been diagnosed with cancer. He's some Hollywood guy. And he promised God 90% of everything he had if he survived, because he wanted to live. So, he's having this mental conversation with God, and he's swimming back to shore. And then he's like, well, I'll give you 50%. And then he gets closer and goes, all right, God, you saved me. I'm going to give you that 10% I promised you, right? And so, when people go through dark times, they reach out to God. And so wars and cataclysms all, bring people back to that reality, because people get cocky, their egos say, I don't need God, or whatever it is. Things are going well. You see how it is, right? Success ruins people. You see it when people win the lottery. You see people when they become rich and famous. I cover it all the time. Success makes people arrogant. It makes people think they did it on their own, and they don't need to connect to God or, any of these things. They don't need their soul. They don't need any of these things. And so that's why wars are a part of any sort of spiritual movement, right? They are the catalyst to humble people and then, send them in the right direction and connect with God. In the heartfulness system, there was, Babaji was ordered, the second master system, through, divine connection. He was ordered on a spiritual level to start World War II, and get the British out of India and some other things like that, right? That there are spiritual beings that are given work to do, and they create the circumstances on a spiritual level so that things will happen. And there was this story, there was a guy, he was like from Denmark, and he wrote a couple of great books, heartfulness books. They're not available anymore. I don't have them because of, whatever. They were left in storage, and I didn't have access to the storage. My ex did, so these were books I own but don't have the ability to read directly from them. But he wrote these two good books. This guy had some problems. He was brought into the mind region in the heartfulness, by Babaji in the heartfulness meditation. But he, tried LSD or was using LSD. I mean, he had some issues, right? I don't know if the guy quit or what, but he wrote some good books. And he was with Babaji when these two well-dressed Indian westernized, they dressed sort of in Western suits, came to talk to Babaji about social work, right? And Babaji was kind of in a mood, and he really didn't, this guy could tell that Babaji didn't think very much of these two guys. And so they explained what they wanted, and they were going to, bring about world peace. And Babaji said, "Oh, I don't want world peace. I want war." Right? And they, and they couldn't get out of there fast enough, right? And so, peace, inner peace is what heartfulness brings people to, but there can be, cataclysms going on outside, right? And so the need for war, the need for, people to want to redeem themselves collectively and individually for the wrongs that we've committed, going against the will of God in so many ways we don't even know, like things that we're not even aware of because our, system is so demonic and so messed up, we're not even aware of like how unnatural we are and how, how much we're going against our soul and how much we're creating all these impressions, boga, all this negative, things we have to bear out in the future because we're going against our soul's path and the will of God. So for those reasons, World War III is necessary, right? But on a material level, on a human level, it's like, well, why would we want that, right? Okay, so I found a Whisper's message. I kind of remembered it existed. I haven't read this in years, but I'll put it in a folder related to the prophecies ones. But this is about World War III. So this is Tuesday, December 24th, day before Christmas, 2002, 10 a.m. My dear daughter, so he's talking to the medium, the woman who took down these messages. My dear daughter, let joy emerge from this flood of sadness you have been in for a few days. Voices that are dear to your heart have expressed themselves, and they will contribute to it. The world's future is gloomy, in many respects. Rumors of war are rising up, and destructive weapons are ready to operate. The voice of reason does not manage to prevail. Only interests prevail over everything. Man's killing frenzy keeps raging everywhere in this world. This planet becomes a true cause for concern for the higher authorities. As the balance of the planetary system is being threatened, we do not want to be alarmists, but only to make humanity be aware of the danger threatening it when the thunderbolts it sparked off will strike down on it. What lessons will it need before the irreparable occurs to bring it back to more soundness of view and tolerance? Fatal weapons are a threat to the very ones who have them. They play with fire, and the irreparable destruction that will ensue will be the consequence thereof. Ravaged from every side, it will be bled by this ultimate fight. May man revert to a more right view of things and wisdom while it's not too late. You, our faithful aspirants, carry on your way with faith and keep developing love in yourselves, the only means to neutralize hatred. Be blessed this year's end, Babaji. Because it's the end of 2002. He said irreparable twice in this particular message. And so the part at the end where he says love neutralizes hate, so this is the need for people to reach up and connect to God and not, feel negative, whatever it is, right? the more hate there is, the more war there is, right? The more, the worse it gets. The more people hate, the more anger there is, the more fear, the more negativity, the more, the worse this is going to be, right? So this is going to happen, but it can be negated to whatever extent, right? If more people were doing the heartfulness system and connecting to God and doing it the right way and, feeling God's love, then this would be something that was, negated in every possible way, right? It would reduce the amount of the, the fuel that is making this war into the destructive whatever it is, right? This is the need of the time. I'm going to start doing stuff. I talked to my wife about it. I mean, hopefully I will. I'm going to get the merch stuff going, and I'm going to maybe run ads and try to bring in more people. I haven't wanted to do that. I haven't, not wanted to do it. I've just been neutral on it. Whatever amount of people have been here, and I'll talk about this in a separate video. But I'm going to, try to expand my audience base just to get the word out, because it needs to be, the more people who are neutralizing the hatred, the less this, thing's going to suck. But in terms of the mundane aspect of this, right, in terms of the human aspect in this war, in this whatever's happening, well, what needs to happen? Well, you see in every, like, bad B movie or, any kind of movie where there's an epic battle, there's always a villain, or there's always these guys. You'll see it in, there'll be some, like, meeting, like a board meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or whatever it is, right? And there'll be one guy who just wants nuclear war. There's one guy who can't wait to launch the nuclear missiles, right? So there just has to be guys like that on either side. And what he said in the Whispers message, where he said, let me find it here. I got to open it again and then find the words here. And so it says, the voice of reason does not manage to prevail. Only interests prevail over everything. Only interests, right? So the interests of the powers that be overrides what's best for everyone else and themselves. And you have these Warhawks who they're so fear-based, and they're so, we got to strike first. I mean, they can't wait to launch whatever it is. They can't wait to, they're trigger happy, right? And there's always guys like that. There's always people like this. And you just need one side or another. There was a movie about this recently. I covered the Sting song, the musician Sting, who's I hope the Russians love their children too. And it starts off and it says, Mr. Khrushchev says we will bury you. And there was a movie with Benjamin, what it is, Cumberbatch, whatever. Benedict Cumberbatch or whatever. Please don't tell me. Don't care. Don't need to know. And he played a spy, like an ordinary sort of businessman who ended up spying because there was a Russian general, a respected Russian general, and he was like, Khrushchev is like effed in the head, right? Khrushchev was like wanting nuclear war, and he leaked secrets. It's a good movie. It's well worth watching. I'm not recommending it, but at least in terms of what I saw. And Khrushchev actually said this: "We'll bury them. We'll bury the Americans, or whatever it is." And so then I remembered the line from Sting's song, and so you just takes, and I mean he was pushing for it, and then this leaked information just sort of clipped his nads, right? So, but there just has to be one side, one guy who's willing to pull the trigger, and a bunch of paranoid people who are on the other side, right? Who just don't want to get punked, who just don't want to lose, who just don't want to, whatever it is, right? And so when that's the case, like that's all it would take for nuclear war. But in terms of the war that's happening, there is no interest in America to fight. Like I said, only 15% of people favor American troops in the Ukraine exchanging fire with the Russians. And that isn't even a declaration of war. Like, how many people in America would endorse a war with Russia, right? And so what has to happen? Well, there has to be a big event. Like, the Americans our government and media have said the Russians have hacked elections and that they have hacked the pipeline. Remember the pipeline, the gas pipeline, that it was Russian hackers doing that. And so there would have to be like like a shutdown of the electrical grid, something huge that they could pin on Russia and say that's an act of war. Or there had to be some sort of, false flaggy type of a thing, some kind of catalyst that would make Americans say, oh, we got to get those Russians, right? So something like that would have to happen in the next so many years over this period of time, right? Right now, Americans want no part of war and, wouldn't agree to it. And you can't really fight a war when your population is, and again, like no one really, I mean, Joe Biden has very low approval ratings and, we're not trusting him. And like I said in other videos, that, that the right wing people, the Republicans, don't want any part of this war, most of them, right? And they're the ones that always are more war, more trigger happy when it comes to war. And so there are things that are going to have to happen, events and, whatever kind of, fake events or whatever kind of ways to motivate. I mean, the Russians, many of them don't want war. Obviously, Europeans and people outside of these two countries don't want to see nuclear war. And so, I mean, whatever it is, right? If there's war between America and Russia, then you're just in a matter of, events, a series of events, because war escalates and the weapons of war escalate to where nuclear war happens, right? That nukes are fired and nukes are used. And once that happens, all these things that are talked about in these whispers messages end up happening, right? And the effects are going to be so widespread and so cataclysmic that, no one's even going to be aware of what destruction, irreparable damage to the earth it's going to change, how animals and people live on this planet and, all the rest of it. I mean, that's what's being said here in these whispers of the brighter world messages. And so, again, reducing your contribution, like all the hatred, all the blame, thinking it's Biden, thinking it's the controllers, right? That there has to be, God has to allow this to happen. Like it has to be something where, it needs to happen on some spiritual level. That for whatever reason, whatever we've done, whatever mistakes we've made, that, we are needing this to redeem ourselves. Like this is a consequence, a reaction to our wrong living. And to move forward on a positive level, this war has to happen. And God is endorsing it, right? Which is, what the Heartfulness teaching has been saying for, over 20 years here in these messages. And then just, the divine knowledge that's there. So I'm going to continue to talk about this in this way. I'm going to search through the whispers messages and find other ones that are relevant, because there's more of them. Like I just found that one, and that's kind of an important one. So I'm going to add that to. I have a folder within the prophecies folder where I have other related messages. But there is. It just like you kind of can feel it. Like I haven't been worried about it, but I'm aware of it, right? Like I was agitated and wasn't sleeping well. I did a sitting like for a couple nights, and there's just something, I don't know, like it just feels like this is different, right? Because when I grew up in the 80s, they used to teach kids, not the 80s, the 70s, we used to do drills and things, and you used to have to hide under your desk because that's what you're supposed to do when a nuclear bomb hits the missile hits your town. Right? You hide under your desk as a little kid and it saves you. But I guess that's so like whatever's falling, debris falling. But we used to do drills and was very aware of the possibility for nuclear war. And like I said, there was a whisper, there was a message, there was some teaching where Master Chargy said nuclear war doomsday had been delayed. And so I don't know if it could be delayed again. I don't know, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's happening with this. But it feels like we're in the beginning of something that is going to end up sucking, right? At least on a human level. Like it's, it's necessary. It's, it's spiritual. It's, important for humanity to move forward. It's resetting, cleansing. It's all these positive things. But for us, it's going to suck, right? I can't imagine nuclear war is going to be enjoyable, like, or any kind of World War III, especially now because of the way the world is. Like, our civilization, our economy, people just suck so bad that there's like nothing worth saving at this point, right? There's things worth saving, but, in terms of the majority of what life is right now and the way people are, it just sucks. So it's not like something we can make some claim at how good it is and how divine our system is and give reasons for it to keep on going. Because even good cultures, even good civilizations, even good governments and things come to an end. Everything does. And we don't have a good one. So, things like this always end badly. It's like a bad marriage ends in a bad divorce. And that's what's happening right now. And, this is just playing out in some divine drama. And I find looking at it like that is very helpful, because then you're not all mad at, Biden or Putin or whatever it is, right? Because they're just, or the controllers that control them, because even beyond that is God's will. And there's lots of people say they believe in God, but they give, many truthers give more power to the so-called controllers, what they call the elite, than they do to God, right? Which is, effed up, because then you really don't have faith. But anyways, I'll continue on with this in future videos. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.